on 9 o'clock, so we'll commence this meeting. Just before we start, I'll throw over to Andrew because we've got a few staff changes going on. I think most of us know Diane, but she's had a bit of movement long ways or something, so I'll get Andrew just to explain the two new positions.
Thanks, Andy. So one of them's not here yet, but he is coming along. So you all know Diane really well, but Diane's come into the Liverpool Spaces Manager role, which is effectively a replacement for, what was his name? Dion. Dion, who left a year or so ago, and over the last year, Garrett Blair had been managing that role, and also the community property role as well. So Garrett Blair has also left now, as you know. He said goodbye to him at the last committee meeting, I think. So Diane's come in to take on largely Dion's role around the operational management of open spaces and recreational facilities. Has a really strong background with Gisborne District Council and in Tairāwhiti generally, so a really strong person for that role. And we've also recruited for the community property role a man called Laird Kennedy. And Laird comes from a construction background in a construction company in Nelson, where he has had responsibility for operational management, business management and that sort of thing, so some really strong skills as well. Probably one of the important things around Laird's portfolio is that we're moving solid waste and waste minimisation under Laird as well. So still keeping the same team in place around waste minimisation and our solid waste operations, but putting a bit more support in there from a management perspective with Laird coming into that. So he'll be here later today. You might want to just welcome him and say hello, but he's really enthusiastic and I think has some really good, strong skills for that role.
Thanks for that, Andrew. Right, we'll go to the agenda proper. I have no apologies and no declarations of interest. So I move to the confirmation of the non-confidential minutes, pages 5 to 11. Moved by Councillor Burdett, seconded by Councillor McLean. No matters? All those in favour? Against? Carried. We'll go through the action sheet kind of line by line because it's been sort of a while since we've got down there. So report from the Youth Council is requested, update to come Thursday. When are we were kind of wanting to get them in front of us if it was suitable to them, so if we can make a date for that. So, yep. Is it tomorrow? Thursday? Or is it... No, I don't know what that update to come Thursday. I don't know what that's about. Do we know what that's about?
No, I don't know.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Apologies here.
All right, thank you. Community Development Service. Yeah, this has got the same reference down there, so I guess that's coming to us. Tolaga Bay Beach Forestry / Yep. Art and Places Public. Yes.
Can I speak to this issue of doesn't specifically appear, but it's coming up EP&R today, that there was a suggestion that there was a large body of slash in the sea, and you'll see warnings were put out to vessels. Well, there has been no evidence that there was a large body of slash in the sea, and it will be further reported at EP&R this afternoon, but I just think it's important to note it here.
That was publicly notified too, to get information back if anyone saw any. So.
Absolutely. Now, all of that was done, and it seems like there was no body of slash, and I just think it's important that we follow that through, but it will be expanded on in more detail this afternoon.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so that could probably come off this action sheet. Staff will look into who's responsible for the Ruatora carving installation.
Penny, when she's got herself comfortable, can respond to that. Ruatoria carving.
staff to look into what's happening with the Ruatora carving installation.
Actually, I'm having a bit of trouble finding any reference to council involvement with it's a PO, isn't it? Yes, I can can find some anecdotal reference to council helped install it, but that's all.
That it be lit up
Oh,
and taken on board at an annual plan meeting and agreed to. So nothing's happened to date.
okay.
So Bill, you're thinking the only action is to get it lit? Everything, yeah.
You think,
Through the chair, I think there's still a little bit more work to do on investigating that and the commitments that council's made, but fair to say there's been no funding commitment through council's LTP or annual plan for this particular piece of work, but we will come back with a more comprehensive response around that to the next committee meeting.
subsequent to that, Mr. Chairman, to inform Andrew, Gareth was dealing with a lady called Marika Warmanhoven, and with that particular issue in terms of the PO, plus the lighting in Te Pūanga Waitonga Park. Again, that's an issue agreed to by council and no action to date. And very serious now, given the community's issues up there at present. Very, very serious.
All right, thanks for that. Some of these go back a bit further, so probably don't need too much. Well, the only thing really would be to look if they need to come off. Artworks from the previous council chambers, that's been addressed, hasn't it?
No, it's not complete, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
It's not complete. We're just getting fobbed off all the time. I've asked a long time ago for the artwork to be reinstated permanently in this chamber, and it is with Mr. Lardelli, I understand, but to say it's complete is not accurate.
Right, yeah.
So we want to see the artwork that used to hang in the former council chamber hanging again in this one. And there was a resolution by council agreeing to that. And simply there's just been procrastination ever since.
Okay, that goes back to October on the action sheet, so if we can have
Yes,
that looked at, please.
2016, 18.
Yep.
But it was asked before that.
Update on Endeavour replicas? Well, just whoever's involved here, you can update your side of it if you like, Malcolm.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. It's been going along slowly, but positively. We've extended the time out till the end of February. At this stage, we're sitting, even although the Give a Little page doesn't show the full amount, because I've realised that they take 10% off you. So we've been doing some private collecting, and the fund is sitting at just over $13,000. We've had some extremely good and kind donations from people around the community. The other day I picked up $1,000, $500. A couple of councillors have been very generous as well. So don't feel uncomfortable about donating to us. We will get there. It's going to happen. So we're just waiting on some more funding as well. So yeah, it's looking really good.
So quick arithmetic, is that about 42? We've got 19 from council and 10,000 from another source.
Yes, that source has been in contact with me and he's monitoring what we're doing, and I'm keeping him informed very much. And there is a guarantee of 10,000 if that's going to get it totally over the line.
Thank you.
Yep.
219. Review of the following East Coast Township plans, Te Aroha, Tikitika, Rangitukia, Wharekākeka and Portaka. That's off the top end. Implementation of the updated East Coast Township plans. The review, I understand, is to go back to those communities and update the plans. Just through you to Andrew, is that correct?
Kate, I might like to respond to that.
Yes, we're happy to return to those townships to support the review and engagement while engaging with those townships.
Supplementary to that, Mr. Chairman, there's a lot of work involved in this. It's not just going there and ticking off what's required, because if you take the case of Ruatoria, it's 11 years now since the original plan was put in place, and it needs to be updated before it's implemented. And I mean, that took us several meetings with the communities to get those plans in place. I'm just wondering where we are on that.
Through the chair, we have a full update on all township planning coming in March.
Yep, that's scheduled for March. And last one I've got there is the Freedom Camping, which will be, I'm sure, come in front of us at some other meeting. You got something like that, Councillor Preston?
Yeah, just looking at this, I've got a little bit of a concern about the time delay. I know there's freedom camping and summer camping still happening now, but we're not going to get a report until mid-2019. We've also got the freedom camping bylaw up for review this year, and also an election. So I am really quite concerned that by the time we get this information and we go through the whole bylaw with public consultation and everything, we're not going to quite get there for next summer with any possible changes. I've been getting a lot of feedback from the freedom camping and the summer camping up the coast this year, and there seems to be quite a lot of confusion still between summer camping and freedom camping at Kaiawa in particular, but a lot of the other beaches. A lot of people aren't getting permits. They're freedom camping. They're not self-contained. The toilets at Kaiawa in particular have been hammered. So yeah, I would like to see an interim report come through about the freedom camping, so we are not left at the last minute to make major decisions when it comes to the bylaw, because there's been a lot of issues. It's been the busiest year ever, and it has been managed well. There's a lot. Everyone's happy, but there's still a lot of confusion between our two camping, freedom camping and summer camping, that needs to be addressed, I believe.
So what's the staff understanding of the timelines for that review?
Through the chair, can you repeat the question, please?
What's the staff timelines for that review?
Yeah, and the timelines reflect our capacity. So the strategic planning team is going full, they're full steam ahead, and this is the earliest we can do it mid this year. That's really what that timeline reflects. It's not trying to postpone anything, and it really is just a capacity matter.
So mid this year, June. All right, thanks for that. Okay, we'll move on to, sorry, I should have done this, but no, I can do it now. I see Mr. Are you for the trees? Yes. Klaus, is it? It's okay. I'll invite you to come up and present if you wanted to present, or were you just wanting to listen in? My understanding is the report should have been on the website. Okay, just for clarity, you are able to present prior to the meeting, but once we start discussing the report, you won't be able to present on it. So if you just want to listen in, that's fine.
Probably it may be worth noting for the public that the recommendation is simply to note the contents of the report.
That's right. Yeah.
There isn't a recommendation which is making a decision on the trees in this report. So you may want to, if you're passionate about a particular topic, then you may want to address us on it anyway.
Thank you. I've been a resident of Gardner Place for 14 months, and one of the reasons we bought our property was because of the lovely shaded avenue aspect of the street, and that is the result of the mature Goodidsias planted in our street. I'm aware that there's been a bit of a controversy over them over the last couple of years, mainly involving two or three residents who have developed what you might call a passion in terms of the removal of the trees, but equally there are a number of us who are probably more recent arrivals who find the trees really rather charming and like to see them retained. If I could first of all start by just referring you to Appendix 1 that appeared on the website, Program for Tree Removals. There are 3 trees mentioned. I noticed the poor old ginkgos are in for a rough time as well. But the gladiolus in Gardner Place are, according to this, on the Program for Tree Removals. I'm sure this is an inadvertent mistake. I'll just leave that point, having made it. I notice also there are no privets on the list of trees for removal. There are about 20 privets within about 100 metres of my house, and I suffer from hay fever, so I just make that point. Essentially, as you've gauged, I'm here to appear on behalf of the trees. I also have the support of several other residents who are anxious to see their attention. The nub of the argument really is that the trees are suffering from overdue maintenance. They are due for a haircut, and that would substantially resolve some of the issues that some residents find with the trees. They've become overgrown, and so therefore the mass of leaf in autumn and the seed pods which they deposit is probably exaggerated. I believe that if they were given correct or arboreal care, the trees wouldn't pose nearly as much of a problem. I noticed on Appendix 1 that they're described as risk of structural failure, high maintenance. I've been called high maintenance too from time to time. But there's no evidence of risk of structural failure, and I don't believe the maintenance is any greater than any other deciduous species. Just turning to the question of the survey, there were 16 responses, 9 of which have voted for remove. I'm a bit concerned about that because I think those numbers shouldn't be relied upon too assiduously, given that the 3 people who are in favour of removing the trees completely managed to encourage a few neighbours to go along with them, and probably those of us who wanted to retain the trees weren't quite as well organised. But I think in terms of statistics, there were 4 votes for retaining. There were 9 for remove, and there were 3 votes for remove 2 trees. You need to take into account there are 29 households in the 29 properties in Gardner Place, and so the response rate is slightly over 50%. And if you, for example, you can play with statistics, if you add the retained votes to the remove 2 trees votes, you've got 7 against 9. I would just counsel a little bit of reserve on the question, and I would suggest that perhaps a stage 1 approach, which is managing the trees better and then seeing what the results are, would be the appropriate way, which is probably what the officer's report is recommending in any case. I would also note that I received confirmation from the council officers at the end of last year that an arborist report had been carried out and the trees were found to be healthy. There was no suggestion that they cause human or canine allergies, as it's been referred to, and I note that that's in conflict with the Appendix 1, which says that they are at risk of structural failure. We had very strong southerlies at the end of last year, gale force southerlies, and I got out of bed next morning expecting to have branches all over the place and scene of devastation. There was no such thing. The trees are healthy. They aren't intruding on footpaths. There is 1 tree, which is the tree adjacent to Marcy Rolls' house, which grows right over her vegetable garden, and I believe the roots are intruding onto her property. And if any tree was to be removed, that might be one that would warrant some consideration. Again, I would suggest that the best approach is a staged approach. Give them a haircut, and hopefully everyone will see the benefit of that and preserving trees. Thank you for your time.
Right, thanks for that. Just, you can stay there. The committee
That's
may
any
want to ask you questions, but there won't be
Yes.
any discussion, be just questions. One I have for you is that the strategy is to replace those trees with more suitable trees. Do you not see that as a good outcome?
Well, trees don't grow to the height of the gladiolus in 5 or 10 years. These trees have been there for something like 38 years. Any replacement trees is going to dramatically alter the character of the street. They're not going to be 20-foot trees when they go in the ground. I noticed also that the two options we were given were both natives. There was no suggestion of things like flowering cherries, which I think would be much more suitable for the environment, but that's just a personal view.
Okay, thank you. Any other committee questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be discussing this paper very shortly, so you're welcome to stay for the discussion. Right, any extraordinary business? Notices of motions or adjourned business? No? Okay, well, we will get on to that report, which is page 15. I did have a question. I've also been approached, and it's an approach which has been going on for a few years, about trees in other locations, and they're grumpy that we choose to do some places and not others. Trees I'm referring to are just up here, corner of McLean and Stout, and particularly big trees, and neighbours been complaining about it for some years. So the question I have is, how do some trees get on this list and others not? How does one handle that process?
Through the chair, so through the community facility strategy, one of the first plans that you considered was the Street Trees and Gardens plan, and that identified priority areas for greening our city. And you'll remember through the long-term plan, we identified that actually there was no budget had been set aside for replanting of trees. So we've had a history for quite a long period of time where council has removed trees, but has actually not funded the replacement or the greening of the streets that don't have trees. And you'll see streets all over Gisborne that actually don't have street trees, others that have a motley crew of trees. And so I think council was right in saying that it wanted to take a strategic approach to its street trees portfolio. It's a really expensive portfolio for maintaining, so it does need to be properly funded. When you went through that process of considering the street trees portfolio, you looked at the species that you thought were suitable through the advice of officers and those streets and areas that you wanted to focus on and what species should be planted in those places. So that's how those priorities have been set. There wasn't a closed door council process. It was actually a widely consulted process, and I think it's fair for council to say that it's actually gone through a good strategic process to get to the point where it's got to, and has set aside funding for street tree planting and replacement over the current long-term plan. So I think you have a clear strategy which council officers are following at this point, and Gardner Place is one of those priority streets.
Councillor Hazel?
Thank you. Along the same lines, I agree that the strategy was put in place and it was well thought through. I really did enjoy reading the street tree plan when it came out. What I would like to see though is areas like Gardner Place not be targeted for the entire removal or the entire change wholesale, because because we are talking about trees that could be pruned and saved, and instead of making that investment into replanting in that area, we can plant in areas that don't have street trees at the moment. So instead of it being a replacement scenario, we could be embellishing our city with more street trees and simply pruning and taking care of these. Now, I agree that there's likely to be some of these trees that cause problems, and where we have health and safety risks, whether that be lifting footpaths or potential of failure, then I agree that those trees need to be dealt with. But if you can remove the weight through pruning instead of having to, instead of removing the entire tree. I would like to see the city retain some of its mature trees. I don't think the health risks around these trees are potentially as bad as other areas that we've discussed in the past. So, so I would be in support of seeing a sensible approach taken to this, which is removal of any high risk or trees intruding into adjacent properties, as has been discussed in the paper, and then looking at just a sensible approach to pruning and maintenance in this area, because it doesn't seem to be the worst that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. So how does one get on the pruning list? Or how does one find out where their tree, the status of the ones that they're concerned with?
I think there are a number of processes around this. One is you have a limited budget for your maintenance of street amenity. And actually this financial year, you're very close to overspending that reserves and amenity budget for the first time since I've been here. And so there are limitations, but in terms of how do we maintain our street tree portfolio, we have an organised process for that, which is partly we have a contractor that is responsible for monitoring of our street tree portfolio and pruning around scheduled works, but we also have a responsive process through requests for service. So we get many requests from the community around trees outside properties, principally people requesting us to prune them, sometimes people requesting us to plant trees outside their properties. We spend a lot of time dealing with those requests. We do actually have, I think we talked about 4,000 street trees around Gisborne that we are running a program of maintenance and management around. So mixed approach, partly scheduled works where we know there are ongoing issues, partly responses to requests that come from individual people in the community. The Garden Place is one of those examples where we have had requests in the past for removal of those trees, for pruning of those trees, I would say as well, because of the debris. You'll remember the various discussions we've had around silver birch in different streets where communities have wanted to remove them. And we do our best to be responsive to those requests under the policies and guidelines that we can work under. So we're never going to have the perfect process because we have so many and we have such a mixed view in the community about what we should be doing with trees.
Councillor Foster?
Yeah, just a question. Has there been any maintenance done in the past in Gardner Place on any of the trees at all? Has there been any trimmings or any work done on?
Through the chair, yes, there has been some maintenance done in the past in terms of pruning them. I guess it's just the cost factor going forward. If we keep pruning and maintaining them in this way, it is quite costly. So I believe that was one of the reasons why they were included as part of that strategic plan, as a strategic approach to remove them and replace them with something more suitable. And there is the risk of the structural failure, and other councils have highlighted that as well in their policy and planning for those particular Glidersia species.
Councillor McLean.
Whilst we're talking about trees, they all, you know, by removing trees, you can create a huge problem, like been created lately with the removal of the palms down the wharf area. And now we've got another problem because we've got, you know, hundreds of thousands of homeless pigeons in the city area. So when you remove trees, you can create another problem. And there's a major problem within the city right now with the pigeons.
Councillor Burdett.
Given my own experiences, it's just as expensive to prune and tidy up trees as it is to cut them down and replace them. It's a huge cost either way. Just want to clarify, I'm not keen on chopping trees down too either, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Farahinga.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Microphone. I do agree with the sentiment of a lot of my fellow councillors in regards to
treescape. But one of the things that I do recall from our discussions in regards to our strategic approach in relating to trees was the cost factor of maintenance and our want to try and make sure that our rates stayed low at a reasonable value, at a reasonable rate. I'm also cognizant of the fact too that community engagement has already occurred in Gardner Place, and there is a majority of people that were in favour of one option. So I'd still like to see us progress towards that in a sensible manner, like how Councillor Dowsing suggested. However, the retention of those trees will create an impact in regards to the amount of money that we'll be spending maintaining those trees. If residents are wanting to hold on to trees that require higher maintenance, maybe it's that we as councillors need to start considering targeted rates for those areas in regards to managing those trees. If those people in those areas want to retain those trees, then there needs to be something that comes back in regards to that. Also, that could be something that peppers the conversations about people who want more trees in their areas. I mean, if we're where we have two tasks to try to meet the needs of our community, but to also try and make sure that our rates aren't rising rapidly. So if we have that collective conversation across in regards to trees, in regards to other public amenities, directly with our community, then I think that would further inform the decisions that our communities make. So I have two issues. One, that the retention of those trees will be high in terms of dollars, and two, we've already engaged with that community. What does that then look like if we're doing something different in regards to the having engaged that community?
Okay, so the report is just a noting report, but the reading of the report kind of determines that that's what's going to happen in Gardner Place. Can you clarify that for us?
Yeah, that's correct. A couple of comments. So Councillor Wharehinga's comment around where costs lie. Something to keep in the back of your minds is that we have two methods for removal of trees. One is standard removal, which is effectively if a tree is found to be unsafe by an arborist, we will remove it. If there is a strategy that says that trees will be replaced or removed, we will remove them. And then there's discretionary removal. So when standard removal is removal at the ratepayer cost, i.e. through council's budgets. Discretionary removal is when somebody comes to you and says, we want to remove a tree because we don't like it. And through the analysis process, council decides, okay, or the manager decides under the delegations, okay, we will remove it for these reasons. That cost sits on the requester, not on the ratepayer. So that's around removal or pruning of the trees. That cost sits on the requester. You could actually apply the same sort of logic if council has set a strategy to say, we will remove these trees and we will replace them with more suitable trees. And a requester says, no, we don't want you to remove them. We want you to maintain them at a high cost. Then you could possibly take the same approach that that's a discretionary request to keep them when council through a public process has actually decided that strategically it wants to remove those trees.
Can I just ask, is this not...
Councillor Dowsing, then Councillor Seymour.
Oh, is this a question on that exact point anyway? It's not a statement. But it was just, is this not a discretionary removal anyway because these have been found to be healthy by an arborist?
No, this would be a standard removal because council has strategically said that Gardner Place is one of its priority areas to replace the trees that are there.
Councillor Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While the report is an open report, it is actually is saying that these trees will be removed and they will be replaced by coconut or timber. Now, how is that decision going to be made? And we do have to remember that new trees, even if you don't buy one, will take a long time to establish. And this council is not that good at keeping an eye on the maintenance and establishment of new trees. And in some of our townships, there's various things happening and look at them by skateboard or bike. So how they're entirely different trees. But officers have some advice on that.
So the decision sits with the parks manager, which effectively sits with my manager or with me. How does the decision get made? You'll see in the report that there's actually been quite significant consultation with the street already, both through the community facility strategy, street trees and gardens process, and also through the process that Carol has run with the street. We don't have a unanimous viewpoint from that street, as you will see, but we do have a majority. Whatever the reasons for that majority in terms of caucusing and that sort of thing, we do have a majority that actually supports the removal and replacement of those trees, and I think replacement with bullfire.
That's right.
Just adding to that, through the chair, we, through the street trees and garden plan, it outlines for each area specific trees that could be suitable. So from that list, bullfire and titoki were options. So those were put to the community as part of that Maldrop document. And yeah, as Andrew said, the majority voted for bullfire. There is an option, I suppose, to do further consultation around that replacement, but whether that's necessary, I'm not sure.
Thank you. I'm absolutely happy with the tree recommendations. We went through a process to determine what council's preferred trees would be, and it's based on our maintenance and future cost and getting some uniformity throughout the region, and we decided on natives being a priority. So I'm happy with the choice of trees. What I would like to ask Mr. White is, I can't see that there would be too much benefit in terms of cost in the wholesale replacement of doing it all at one time. Is there a potential for a stage approach to this to say replace 2 or 3 trees every year for 5 years instead of doing them all at once, so that we get some establishment period and see if the benefit to the community of removing the worst to begin with, and then see if the community starts to embrace the mixed trees or not? Does it need to be all done at once?
Thanks for that question, Councillor Dowsing. I think it's a really good one. Thanks for that question, Councillor Dowsing. I think it's a really good one. So the Community Facility Strategy, Street Trees and Gardens Plan set a 3-year program for removal and replacement of street trees. So that's a capital works program. And I think it's something like $300 and something thousand a year for street tree renewals. For the last 7 years of the current long-term plan, there is no budget available for this. However, you have the opportunity in the next long-term plan to continue that program. So I would say with your current long-term plan, you've got 3 years to get as much done as possible. But I think it's probably quite likely we will be coming back for further discussion around this with the 2021 to 31 long-term plan.
Can I just make one further comment about COFI that people may be aware of? Because I find it amusing that it says the pods on the gleditzias are an ecological risk, because in actual fact, farm foresters and people collect them, grow the seed, and cattle just love those pods. But I wonder if the residents have thought about the very hard seed pod that's only around 6 inches long that comes off a COFI. It will get caught in your lawnmower just as much. It isn't as big and it's not as obvious, but COFI do have quite a large seed pod too that is quite hard, and once they get established and flower well, they will be on the lawns too. They're pretty, I agree, they're really nice, but you need to go into this with your eyes open.
All right, thanks for that. Just an observation with Councillor Dowsing point. I know that quite often the value and amenity value of street trees is a uniform size of a tree scape going through, so that might be counter that argument a little bit, where you've got different sizes happening at different times and that. Having been here a long time now and discussed trees for a long time, if we have 2 people discussing a tree, one will be for, one will be against. If we've got 100 people discussing a tree, 50 will be for, 50 will be against. It seems to be the nature of this sort of conversation we have. It's always quite difficult. Anyway, it's just a noting report, and we've had given a good bash. So moved by Councillor Wharehanger, second by Councillor Foster. All those in favour? All those against? Carried. Page 24, Tairāwhiti Museum roof update. Thanks, Penny. Do you want to say anything forward or just take questions? There is an update on it, isn't there? There's a bit of a change in the situation.
Yeah, can I, I'll just make a comment. The fundamental around the museum roof is that we want to have the museum roof watertight in time for the sesquicentennial celebrations. That's because the museum wants to display collections during the sesquicentennial that actually will serve a big part of that event. And that's a good thing. And we should, we want to do our best to make sure that our part in that, well, we do it, basically. So I would accept that there might be a bit of frustration around up and down and roundabout with the solution to this problem, but it's actually no different to the discussions that we've had over the last few years around projects like the Lawson Field Theatre, the library, and all those sorts of things where it takes some time to get to the point where you get the best and most cost-effective solution to the problem. And what I take from this report is actually we've had the right people involved in these recent discussions from our community, the experts who can give us the best advice, and I think we're heading in the right direction. And from a cost perspective, it's a better direction than where we were heading. From a practical solution perspective, I'd say it's probably a better solution as well. A little bit of work still to do, but you remember at the last meeting I started to give you an idea that maybe we were heading in this direction.
Thank you. I agree, Mr. White, that there's been some tossing and turning, and there is the potential to criticise around that, but I don't believe it would be fair. I think that in this case, someone's put a really good commercial hat on and made a alteration to what's been a long-running plan, and it's a very brave move to actually come back to us with an alteration of this scope, steering us away from complete replacement and full modification of the roofline of that building. We've actually gone back to what our requirements are as a landlord for that building and what our requirements are for maintenance purposes of that building, and it is the priority is watertightness, not beautification, not rejuvenation. It's purely practical. So I was really glad to see this report. I was proud of our staff for questioning their own decisions of the past and questioning the logic that had been put in place behind the change, and coming back to us with a more sensible approach and a well thought through one. So thank you for doing everything you've had to do to get to this point, and hopefully saving us several $100,000 in the process, no doubt.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, we were looking at a huge cost, spiralling cost for the replacement of the roof. And I've spoken with one of these gentlemen here in depthly about the situation as well. And, you know, when you go into a re-roof, you're going to be looking at a whole reconstruction virtually of a lot of part of the building just to cater for it. So, and that's a huge cost. So I'm really happy that we've come back to the basics of with a repair. And a good repair can make that roof last a long time as well. And it could be ongoing as long as these strategic placings for footings and safety concerns on the roof are there and the maintenance is regularly done with the leaf removal and everything. We could be looking at that same roof in the next 5 to 10 years with a minimal amount of expense. So I'm really happy and so I'm really pleased to see this report and some common sense put into the whole thing. So yeah, I'm really keen to support this big time.
Councillor Dunn.
I tried to look through the report and see what the museum folk had to say about this option. So didn't really say much in the report, but are they happy with this outcome?
Excuse me,
have we spoken with them?
Sorry, what was the question? I was just asking if Penny had any comments you needed to make.
I was just wondering whether I didn't gauge from this report how the museum board feel about this option, and have we spoken to them, and how are they with this?
Yes, Morena Koutou. Yes, the museum staff are fully cognizant with this report. Their focus also is water tightness as well. And at the risk of being overly operational, you see an image on page 26, and the numbers refer to where the leak points are, and you will, pardon me, be able to see that actually that's the majority of them are where new extensions have been added on. And you'll also see the big grey patch to the left. I'll just alert you to that is a gigantic plane tree in winter and may come up in future as an issue for maintenance. And the other key thing around the roof is, of course, it's a big complicated roof which requires big complicated scaffolding every time you take a leaf out of the guttering, so those anchor points are also for future proofing it. If you don't mind, I'd just like to have a little digression since I just mentioned a tree. Carol, who was here before, it's a little staff thing, Carol, who was here before on the Livable Communities team, that'll be the first and last time you see her. She's moving to Kate's team, the strategy team. And just introducing Leah Kennedy, who's the new community assets manager, who's come from Nelson to join our team.
Thanks, Penny. You said staff, you didn't say anything about the board.
No, we don't directly communicate with the board from council. The staff at the museum do, the museum director does.
So the indication from staff is that the board's happy with the room?
I couldn't honestly say that I know what the board think.
I'll just make a comment on that. So the relationship is with the staff, and you've seen the staff of the museum apparently work quite closely with their board. So when you get delegations from the Museum Trust, it's the director and it's the chair of the board who come along, and they seem to work pretty closely together. So I think they've got a strong relationship and they communicate really well together. And I think it's fair for what Penny said, that actually the objective of this project throughout for the Museum Trust has been pretty transparent in that actually they want to be able to host displays without them getting wrecked by water falling on them. So that's what we're focused on resolving. Sure, there could be other benefits to be gained from a full roof replacement, but actually from a cost-effective perspective and in terms of the key objective that we're trying to achieve, I think we've got the right solution that we're working towards here.
Councillor Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I totally support this too. I'm actually really happy and excited to see that we have got to a sensible decision, because I remember 2 years ago we talked about this and it had already been sitting on for 15 years on the critical to fix list, and I was horrified at that. And then reports were postponed for more information. So well done, staff, on getting to this situation, because I'd hate to see that we couldn't have historical artefacts and displays by TR. So well done. Thank you.
All right. Okay, if there's nothing further, it is just for noting. Moved by Councillor Burdett, second by Councillor Wharehenga. Nothing further. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Next, we have the Tokomaira Bay toilet removal. Having used this twice in the last early summer, get it out of there.
Speak to it, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly, yeah.
Yes, thank you. I took some photographs in there and sent them down in the week before Christmas, and I'm appalled that it wasn't noted by our regular maintenance before that. But I do want to thank council officers, Mr. White and the Chief Executive, for responding immediately to the state that it was and replacing it with a portaloo for the summer. And I totally support the recommendations in this report. And I also do support a suggestion that either from tourism or from the total upgrade of the wharf fund. We're waiting for that report from the company that are looking at the benefits of that upgrade, that there may be some money in that wharf replacement to assist in the providing of the toilet there. But otherwise, there's a perfectly adequate toilet in the main street of Tukumara Bay at the moment.
Yeah, totally agree. The publicity of having such a bad toilet there is probably driving the issue more than anything. And the one in the Tukumara Township is a particularly good toilet. You know, it's really good. The only issue I would see was if that wharf does get developed and there is a lot more activity down there where you need something. But the Portaloo through the summer seems to be an adequate solution to me at this stage.
And then the next one said, I got a message to say that being tipped over, being tipped over, but was reinstated by someone from local. So you have to be really good to recognise the good things to do to support our initiative.
All right. On that, having a Portaloo that's there for a longer period of time, you may have to look at some suggestion of anchoring. I'm sure it's easily done. Yeah. Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you. To save us all from the risk of talking about toilets all morning, I'll move the paper.
Oh. Moved by Councillor Dowsing. Seconded by Councillor Perry.
Yeah, I think that great response from staff in regard to recommendation of removal and then also supplying the Portaloo in the short term. I think now it's about conditioning the people that go down there to actually actively engage that other really good toilet prior to heading down to Waima, prior to heading down to the wharf, and that's just in regards to us communicating those things with the community. So yes, so happy to second this paper.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
The completion of 10 years back. Well done to Councillor Seymour. It's been in front of us, not just this particular committee, but council too for a long time. Good outcome. Same as in Hicks Bay. Hicks Bay's got an excellent toilet now. I hope Tukumara Bay gets a replica of that one.
And we've got a good one down to Nara as well. So yeah, coast's getting well catered to now. All right, if there's nothing further, it's been moved by Councillor Burdett and Councillor Dowsing, sorry, and seconded by Councillor Whareia. All those in favour? Against? Carried. And I believe there's nothing more. Does Garrett want to come and introduce himself? Or is it, Leard.
Leard, would you like to come and introduce yourself? Not to put you on the spot, but yeah. I'll support you.
Welcome, Leard.
So as I said at the start of the meeting, Leard Kennedy's come to join us from my hometown of Nelson, and don't worry, I didn't know Leard before he came here, but some real similarities between the two districts, geographically, population, and that sort of thing. But one of the things I really like about Leard that I got through the recruitment process, that he comes from a private industry background, but has a really strong social community conscience and focus. And, you know, I think that's actually, it's not rare, but it's not across the board. And it's really nice to see somebody who can teach me stuff about community value and that sort of thing, who comes from private background. So I've sold you, Leard, now it's your job.
Good morning, all. Yeah, it's a pleasure and an honour to be working here now. So, as Andrew said, I've come from a private background down in Nelson, working 5.5 years in a family construction company. I see whilst there's a big learning curve in regards to the private versus public forum, there's a lot of crossover too. So I enjoy, I've got a big learning curve coming up for me in the next few months, but I'm looking forward to getting stuck in.
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Councillor Seymour. So Garrett left a lot of handover notes, and I've also carried quite a lot of stuff since that I'm handing over. So just remember that Garrett was working across both Laird's role and the role that Deanne's in as well. So transfer of responsibilities across to both of those new managers has happened and is happening. Like Laird says, this is a big culture shock for him coming from private to public, and actually also, although the similarities coming to a new city where some of the dynamics, or new district where some of the dynamics are a bit different. So I'm really focused on making this as smooth and easy as possible for Laird to slot in and add value, but would ask for a little bit of patience around some of the things as he gets up to speed with them, because as you can see, things like the museum roof and that, they're quite complex, quite complicated technically, and also we know that sometimes some of the solutions we need to find in our community are actually quite complicated from a community perspective and political perspective as well. So a little bit of patience with Laird, but I'm always here as well, so we'll be good.
Committee's attention, I've attended 2 community meetings this week, one in Te Aroha, the Progressive Association, and interestingly enough, one of their main concerns was, and I've said it in our report, it's some time out, in terms of the playground facility next door and the lack of action on our part. There are a number of other things that I brought to Heather's attention, and she's dealt to it by way of requests for services that haven't been fulfilled. But more importantly, at that meeting, I discovered, strangely enough, that there's a survey being conducted amongst all the communities this side of Tolaga on the coast, funded by the Department of Internal Affairs. From what I can understand, right across the board into the needs, service from the council, you name it, this questionnaire probably deals to it. I was told that finally they will have it all compiled and available for Marae and council by the 28th of June, which I think is a good thing because we haven't done that for a long time. In terms of the Ruatoria one, and I must give you the background to this, this is the second one within a month. Ruatoria, like the communities on the coast, is having huge problems with pee, and more so burglaries, all sorts of things are happening. I mean, as an example, the Minister, Papa Boise, 89-year-old, was in critical care unit in Gisborne here when they broke into the vicarage, pinched his generator, chainsaw and other stuff. These are the sorts of things that have been happening. So the community got together. The first meeting had 70 plus people. A steering committee was put together, all young people and very enthusiastic. But out of that came the issue about lighting in the Puawaitanga Park, and that had been on the agenda for a long time. And I do believe that it is council's responsibility to assist the community in Ruatoria by putting that lighting in there, because I was quite stunned when we were given a report on the activities thus far. They have a night patrol. This is a private citizens. It's being funded, the vehicle by the Runanga President, and they're providing the gas, etc. There's a group of 10 or 12 of volunteers doing this work. And I was, as I said, blown away when they said you would be amazed at the number of people, adults, in the Te Puawaitanga Park between 1:30 and 4 o'clock in the morning, and quite regularly there. So, and of course the lighting issue came up again. But that's about where things are on the coast at this point in time, Mr. Chairman. I think that survey is an in-depth chance to find out what actually is going on and what the needs are there. And the old perennial came up again in Te Aroha, and again last night, was our perceived lack of service to the northern area. And they rattled off a number of things that we had committed ourselves to at annual plan meetings and hadn't actually actioned it. So, as I said, I spoke to Heather about some of the ones from the northern region, but we'll get to the other ones shortly. But I do think that light one in Puawaitanga Park should be addressed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, just on that crime one up there is a real concern. Every time I meet people from the sawmill up there in Bunnings, they're in there to replace stolen tools all the time. You know, they just can't get on top of it. So it's really quite sad where you've got business up there that are community minded and they're just getting ripped off all the time.
And there's 5 sworn officers in Rotorua, aren't there?
Thank you. Yeah, it's certainly not Ruatoria that's the only area being struck by criminal activity at the moment. Wainui's been reporting, robberies every other night almost, and same thing happening there for Whanauko. And then, but what I wanted to ask Mr. White is, can we have an update on the status of the contractor who was stabbed by a needle cleaning our drains? Is that part of your team? Is that?
Sorry, which contractor, Councillor Dowsman?
Someone cleaning the fatberg out of a drain recently.
Be an assets and infrastructure question for David Wilson.